I'm going to show you the denouement of the match between Magnus Carlsen and Radoslaw Wojtaszek. So the first two classical games were drawn, so now they moved into the tiebreak. First tiebreak game was drawn, rapid play, and this is the second rapid tiebreak game. So don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Let's hit 100k, and do consider supporting us via PayPal or Patreon. Links down there. Okay, so here we go. First rapid game drawn. Carlsen with the white pieces, and it's a pretty classical start. Nimzo Indian. Carlsen playing this Rubinstein variation with e3, very orthodox. I always feel that when he plays in this orthodox way, that it shows very serious intent from Carlsen. He's playing a main line. You know, he's not experimenting by playing away from the center. It's very central. It's very classical. And we have lots of exchanges in the middle of the board. So now we've got an isolated queen's pawn. Knight c6. It has a reasonable reputation, this knight e2 variation. But it doesn't present so many problems for black. Knight takes, one can play queen takes here, but pawn takes. Knight is very respectable. And knight f4. So that frees the queen to come out to potentially one of these squares. Bishop d6 and bishop e3. This is known as a very reliable way for black to play, actually, to actually equalize or get close to equality anyway. So white is still, potentially intending to bring the queen to an active square to put pressure here. Remember, h7 is also vulnerable. So bishop takes here. And now, for example, if knight takes pawn, then bishop takes. And white is very slightly better in these kind of positions. Slightly better pawn structure, some control over the dark squares. But queen f6 is well known to be a reasonable way for black to play. Hitting the bishop, putting some pressure here, and the bishop dropped back to e3. Bishop f5 is possible here, but Wojtaszek played knight b4, attacking the bishop, which went back to b1. Now, if white can just push that knight, then of course this knight move is pointless. So bishop f5 played. So this is the point that basically now this bishop is cornered. Black forces the exchange of these light squared bishops, and positionally that's very desirable, so that black is going to be left with, well, potentially a good knight against a bad bishop. Well, let's see what happened to those minor pieces in this game. Queen b3, okay. Carlsen is striking back. So he's looking at the knight, but also looking at the pawn here, and potentially looking at the b pawn as well. Bishop takes, rook takes. Queen d6, so that protects the d pawn, very sensible, and also the knight, of course. a3. Whoop, beg your pardon. So queen d6, so I just do that again. Queen d6 just played, and a3. Now, with hindsight, this is perhaps the most important moment in the game. And this is where I think Wojtaszek goes wrong, and we can trace everything back to this moment. The most natural move here, the move, or let's say the move we would like to play, is to put the knight back on c6. The knight looks at this pawn. There is even potential to come here and maybe into c4. It's protected by the pawn on b7. So why didn't Wojtaszek play that? Well, I guess he was concerned about this move, and maybe just looked at this and thought, oh, well, black doesn't have anything here. White must be fine if the queen is attacked. The queen just pops out at h6 and comes back again. But there's a tactic here. Black can play knight takes pawn. And after bishop takes, now the queen is trapped because a6 is covered. Now, the queen can escape by this move. Queen takes and then queen c6. But of course, this position is about equal. I mean, equal pawns, just major pieces on the board. Black must be fine here. But in a rapid play game, maybe one just doesn't look further than knight c6, queen takes pawn and just think, oh well, there's a problem. And instead, Wojtaszek put the knight back on a6. Now, if this knight can recycle, for example, around to e6, then black is absolutely fine. But let's see what happened. Of course, queen takes is impossible because the queen really is trapped then. So let me see. Actually, it wouldn't be trapped. Let me just see that. I don't think it would be trapped, but black would be fine. I think white can get away with this again. But of course, black would be absolutely fine here. So Carlsen doesn't want to do that. Instead, he plays rook c1. Okay, now we can see this knight is the root of all of black's problems. Like I said, if that knight could spin to e6, everything would be fine. But knight c7, no, not possible. Queen takes pawn, and I mean that's a disaster for black with c6, c7 attacked. So queen d7 played to control cover the b pawn. Now we want to keep that knight there, so bishop f4. So that the so-called bad bishop emerges onto this splendid diagonal, covering the c7 square. So that just keeps the knight trapped in. I mean, knight c7 wasn't possible anyway because the b pawn was hanging, but that just kind of emphasizes it. Rook c8. Still, let's see what happens. You know, if black can exchange a lot of pieces, he might be okay. Queen g3. It's looking less likely that that knight will enter the game as white has such control over this diagonal. f6. So the back rank needs attention. So the king can escape now. h4, excellent move. So that obviously prevents g5. And gives the king some luft. And this is tricky. Wojtaszek decided to exchange all the rooks, trying to ease some of the pressure. I mean, maybe he would have done better to try and mix it a bit with rook c4, but it's already extremely unpleasant, and it's just because of that knight. So rook takes here, rook c8. And b4 from Carlsen, threatening b5, trapping the knight. So b5 from black. Now, that's just a way of creating another target, actually. It just means that if white does actually get into the position, these pawns are really quite loose. So what Carlsen has to do is combine keeping this knight trapped in with a little bit of initiative on the king side, and this he can do very well with the h-pawn. Yep, once again it's the good old h-pawn attack. Queen d7. Black can't do much here. I mean, one could play h6 straight away, actually, just to leave that pawn here and then try and get in with the queen. That's possible. But queen f3, also excellent. Hitting the d-pawn means that knight still can't move, because if knight c7, then you can take, and queen d5 check. And this is a difficult position. You know, black has a choice. You know, how do you try and defend yourself here? Do you play g6? Do you play g5? Or do you play h6? Well, you know, none of these are ideal. h6 played, blocking the h-pawn. But that's problematic, as we'll see. Queen c3. So still preventing that knight from moving, covering that square. These squares are covered. Queen f5. So the queen comes out a little bit, but g3, protecting the bishop, and now queen c6 is threatened. So that means the queen just has to come back. So you can see that black is completely passive here. And here is how Carlsen breaks in. Queen c2, and this is already very, very difficult. So that queen has access to g6, as well as potential to come in on these squares as well, and maybe f5 sometimes. So for example, king h8. Okay, let's play it very gently. King comes here, queen g6. Now, I'm not saying that this is the best defense for black, but you can see white's possibilities here. You can break in with a sacrifice, and that knight on a6 is hanging. Wojtaszek instead played king f8. Now queen h7, disaster. Bishop takes pawn. Pin and win. Yes, I've got it in, got my slogan in. Queen g4, bishop comes back to e3. The damage has been done. And this, of course, is potentially very nasty for black. Knight e6. Check. And now the queen pops out the other side. There are targets all over the place, not to mention bouncing off the king as well with the check. What's black's counterplay like? Well, pretty non-existent actually, because you could say that bishop is rather passive now, but it does a very good job of controlling the knight. Protecting the pawn as well. So now Carlsen's 2 pawns up. I mean, it's lost for black. There's no doubt about that. But after knight g5, well, that kind of simplifies things a little bit. But, well, there really isn't anything for black here. Check, king here, so that it's not perpetual. Pawn takes, check. And now Wojtaszek makes a clear error that makes it quite simple for white. I mean, he should have stepped back with the king, but I mean, it's obvious that this is a lost position for black. He's 2 pawns down. King f6 played. Check here and now. Very nice simplification from Carlsen. Queen g6 check. Forcing a trade of queens. And now a very nice move. Of course, white wants to realize his queenside pawn majority, but at the moment you can't do that, and you've got to watch out for that king coming in. Maybe g4 just shuts everything down, so there is no entry for black's king here. And now white just brings the king across. So here Wojtaszek resigned. Why did he resign? Well, the king is going to go there. We're going to play a4, and then that's game over. So, for example, let's see. So the king shuffles across very quickly. a4 here. You can play a5, actually, and then bring the king all the way across here and play f4 and break in with the king. That's possible. Or you can take here, and the king has to go back here, and what you can see, that forces the king back, and then it is game over. Wow, that is old school Carlsen, the Carlsen that exploits a little weakness in his opponent's position and just plays on it relentlessly and gives his opponent no chance at all. So Magnus Carlsen goes through to the 5th round of the World Cup. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget, it's merch sale on at the moment at the PowerPlayChess online shop. Check out the 20% discount code. You'll find that in the video description and in the comments as well. 20% discount for the next few days. Or Octopus Knight, Pin and Win, Split Rooks, Queen of Siberia. All those favourite slogans or annoying slogans, depending on how you feel about it, and available in t-shirts, mugs, etc. Do check it out. Thanks for watching.